Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'll be taking... welcome, traveler. Do come in and take a seat. You've made it just in time. We've only just begun. Now, tonight I shall take you on a trip to the deep nightmarish forests of Salle du Mer, where only the bravest of lumberjacks dare tread. On the evening of this tale, my travels had brought me to a peaceful little village, lying on the outskirts of one of these ancient forests. The people here made their living harvesting the trees of old and turning them into useful lumber of exceptional quality. However, as I entered the little town, I quickly realized that something was off. The streets were empty and deserted. Old wagons supposed to be filled to the brim with wood and lumber stood there empty, except for the spiders that now had taken up residence there. And only every fourth or fifth house had any light shining inside of it. This place, once teeming with life, was now a soon-to-be ghost town. At the tavern, I learned about the curse that had befallen the place. It all began a few months prior, where a child had gone to play in the woods, but when evening came, it didn't return and was never found. A week later, a lumberjack disappeared, and slowly more and more people, until a day, a month later, when not a single of the workers had returned from their camp in the woods, and when they went to investigate, they had found the camp in pieces, bloody and torn clothing all over the place. A trail of blood had led deeper into the darkness of the woods, but none dared venture in to see what foul demon had done this to the strongest men and women of the town. And so, the people and families left behind decided to get as far away as possible. Only a handful of very stubborn people had chosen to stay, hoping that one day everything would go back to normal. To their luck, an experienced hunter had heard the rumors about a creature terrorizing the village, and had arrived earlier the same day as I. His plan was to venture out in the dead of night, certain that whatever creature it would be sound asleep, allowing him to track it and end it. And of course, I simply had to tag along. We can't let a deed like this go untold. Or at least that's what my thoughts were back then. As darkness crept over the land, enveloping every last bit of safety in its cold grasp, we set out towards the depths of the accursed forest, with only mere torchlight to reveal our path. The forest was eerily quiet, like every living creature was holding its breath, afraid to be heard, afraid to be found. The only sound echoing through the trees was that of our boots against the cold, harsh ground. We walked in silence. The hunter was not a man who liked to chat. Instead, he was inspecting every inch of the place, on the constant lookout for any sign that our prey was near. He held in his hands a crossbow in a very tight grip, loaded and ready for anything daring to cross his path. After an hour-long trek through the woods, we made it to a small clearing, the camp of the lumberjacks. Having been deserted for a longer period, nature had started to reclaim the place as its own. But it was still evident that a battle of life and death had been fought at this very location. The small structures built to shelter the workers and store the wood was broken and snapped in ways only possible by use of great strength, greater than that of man. Torn pieces of fabric still lay about, and along with the structures, in many places it was stained by a darkish color that I could only assume to be the very blood once having pumped through the veins of the hard-working lumberjacks. The morbid tale told by this place sent a shiver down my spine, but the hunter seemed unfazed by the whole ordeal, and he had continued to search for tracks left behind by the creature. But before he could get very far into his investigation of the place, a bone-chilling scream cut through the silence of the woods. It came from behind us, on the pathway towards town. Clearly someone had followed us, and judging from the scream, was now in a situation regarding life or death. A quick glance at the hunter revealed that he had come to the same conclusion as I, and with a quick nod, we both rushed back down the path, hoping we'd make it in time. It was difficult to see the path, as with the pace we were making, the fire in my torch had a hard time keeping up with us, resulting in many a branch smacked across our faces. But we barely noticed, as up ahead had gone silent like the grave, until we could hear the faint sound of a child crying. bumbling our way through the darkness, the hunter finally stopped, and our torchlight got a chance to illuminate what the darkness had hidden before us. Curled up at the base of a fallen tree sat a small child with its face tucked down in safety behind its trembling knees. Startled, I heard my companion speak for what felt like the first time. He asked the child what had happened, and faintly, through the weeping, the child just repeated a single word: "Mummy." Not going to leave a defenseless child on its own, the hunter walked slowly over and kneeled down in front of the child, placing his crossbow on the ground next to him in the process, as to hold out both his hands and place them upon the shoulders of the still weeping child, comforting it and saying that everything would be okay, that he would find its mother. And as he was pulling the child towards himself into a hug, it raised its head and we both gasped in horror, as this was no child. Huge yellow eyes looked directly at us, and a slime-dripping maw of sharp fangs widened into a huge grin, as it, still sounding like a weeping lost child, made a final cry out for its mummy and went in for a bite of the hunter's neck. In screams of horror and agony, the hunter fell flat on his back under the weight of the creature that was way larger than the mere child it had been imposing as. It was humanoid of form, but every limb was bone-thin and elongated to an uncanny degree. But despite its seemingly thin and weak form, it held more strength than an angry bull, and the poor hunter was but an insect before it. With the creature biting into his neck, he desperately tried reaching for his crossbow at his side, but with long, bony fingers, the creature grabbed his arms and held them locked tightly towards the ground. He was unable to move an inch. In mere seconds, it had gone from a curled-up child form to a huge 3-meter-tall monster, now gnawing on the flesh and bones of my defenseless companion. With despair in his eyes, he looked up at me, and in a faint whisper, he cried out for help. I wanted to save him, to deal the monster a deathly blow, but everything happened faster than I could react. Silence had befallen my hunter friend, and I saw that life had left his body. The creature now lifted its head and looked right into my soul with those glowing yellow eyes of its. And then, in a curious way, almost like it was having fun, it spoke that same word from earlier, and had I not been staring directly at the creature whilst it did so, I would have sworn it was a child's voice. It gave me a bloody smile. I did the only thing I could. I ran for it, hoping and praying to the gods that the damn thing would leave me alone and allow me to reach the safety of town. But I soon heard the thumping sound of it running after me, and by the gods that thing was fast. It got closer and closer, toying with me as it said that everything would be okay, in the very same voice and manner as my now dead companion had spoken to the child mere moments ago. Then sounds disappeared, and I soon stopped running to catch my breath. But I should never have done that, as I suddenly felt a hot breath upon my neck, and that faint whisper of my companion crying out for my help right into my left ear. And then, as I slowly turned my head, I saw those bright yellow eyes, followed by a sharp pain in the back of my head, and then everything went dark as I fell into the empty abyss of unconsciousness. And that's where we'll leave the tale for tonight. I'm afraid you'll have to wait till next time to find out what happens next. But I promise you, it's definitely worth the wait.